I think to talk about movies and stuff like that is such a misuse of time.
Marlon Brando changed acting forever. He did not just perform, he detonated. Every pause, every mumble, every flicker of his eyes was rebellion against the old Hollywood order. He was not simply in movies, he remade them.
Maybe say something. I think that we couldn't survive a second if we weren't able to act.
From a streetcar named Desire to The Godfather, Brando embodied truth on screen. But away from the camera, his truth was sharper, sometimes brutal. He carried grudges like others carried scripts. He could be generous, he could be cruel. And when he hated with precision. Brando distrusted Hollywood's machinery, its fakery, its hierarchy, its egos, and he did not hide it. The names he dismissed, the actors he scorned, were not simply rivals. They were symbols of what he despised about the industry.
I felt that he had a right to, in view of what Hollywood has done to him.
He worked with dozens. He influenced thousands. But a handful became reminders of everything he resisted. Here are the 5 actors Marlon Brando revealed he hated, and why their names still burn in his story. Number 1, Frank Sinatra. When Marlon Brando met Frank Sinatra on the set of Guys and Dolls, sparks did not fly. They exploded. Brando called Sinatra Mr. Baldy behind his back, mocking his vanity, while Sinatra derided Brando as Mumbles for his loose, naturalistic delivery. Their feud became legendary, not because of one disagreement, but because they embodied 2 clashing visions of performance. Brando the revolutionary, Sinatra the traditionalist. Sinatra had built his reputation as a consummate professional, a singer who moved into acting with polish and discipline. He valued clarity, rhythm, and showmanship that played the same in every take. Brando, still glowing from his triumph in a streetcar named Desire, wanted something more dangerous. He sought to peel away the surface, to find truth even if it meant breaking meter, skipping beats, or mumbling through dialogue until a raw moment arrived.
Troy, can I believe my eyes? Is it really you?
How goes your percentage of life, Nathan?
Not bad, not bad.
The contrast was irreconcilable. Sinatra loathed Brando's method, once saying that he could not stand this mumbling nonsense that actors think is profound. Brando shot back in private, joking that Sinatra acted like a waiter who sings on weekends, a man who can charm but never transform. Their director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, often had to adjust the schedule around their clashes, giving Sinatra fewer retakes and allowing Brando space to explore his scenes.
When you see a guy reach for stars in the sky, you can bet that he's doing it for some doll.
Crew members remembered the set as a battlefield of philosophies. Sinatra hated long shooting days and wanted one clean take, believing spontaneity would die if repeated. Brando thrived on multiple attempts, searching for subtle variations. That difference became a daily standoff. Brando accused Sinatra of coasting on charm, while Sinatra dismissed Brando's methods as psychobabble dressed up as art. The animosity did not fade with time. Sinatra mocked method acting in interviews, calling it a waste of time for people who cannot just do the job. Brando, though rarely naming Sinatra directly, left little doubt about his contempt. To him, Sinatra represented performance without depth, a man playing versions of himself instead of disappearing into a role. In the end, Guys and Dolls succeeded on screen but left scars off it. Their feud was not about one insult or one scene. It was about 2 ways of living art. Brando embraced chaos as truth. Sinatra embraced control as security. For Brando, that difference was unforgivable. Sinatra was not just a rival. He was the embodiment of everything Brando swore to resist in Hollywood. Number 2, Charlton Heston. Brando dismissed Charlton Heston as wooden, a symbol of the stiff, theatrical acting he despised. To Brando, Heston represented Hollywood's old guard, declamatory, artificial, and out of touch with truth. While Heston commanded epics like Ben-Hur with sheer presence, Brando considered it lifeless spectacle. Their names rarely crossed paths directly, but Brando's disdain was clear. Heston was everything he wanted acting to leave behind. Heston embodied the grandeur of mid-century Hollywood. With his broad shoulders and booming voice, he became the face of historical epics. The Ten Commandments, El Cid, and Planet of the Apes. His delivery was polished, every line projected to the last row of the theater. For audiences, it was majestic. For Brando, it was hollow thunder. He believed that kind of acting belonged to a stage tradition that film had already outgrown.
No more for him.
Brando, by contrast, represented the method revolution. Interior, instinctive, deeply personal. Where Heston thundered, Brando mumbled. Where Heston struck poses, Brando slouched into naturalism. The clash was not personal, it was ideological. Brando once remarked that Heston's acting belonged to statues, not people, suggesting that his performances lacked the vulnerability that could make cinema feel alive. Industry insiders noticed the divide. Studios often compared them when casting. Heston offered reliability, a heroic image that reassured audiences. Brando offered danger, unpredictable, magnetic, but harder to control. Heston fit Hollywood's idea of spectacle, while Brando represented rebellion against it. Their careers ran parallel without intersecting, but in interviews and conversations, Brando made clear he had no interest in what Heston stood for.
For this you shall drink bitter waters.
Heston, for his part, returned the coolness. He once implied that Brando's mumbling was laziness, saying actors who avoided clear diction confused sloppiness with art. To Heston, Brando's method was indulgent. To Brando, Heston's technique was mechanical. Each man represented what the other refused to become. The irony is that both achieved immortality in their own way. Heston through the spectacle of epics that defined an era, Brando through the raw realism that changed acting forever. But for Brando, Heston was a reminder of the past, a towering figure whose power was built on artifice. For Brando, that was the ultimate sin, acting that looked heroic but never truly breathed. Number 3, James Dean. It might seem surprising given Dean's reputation as a Brando disciple, but the admiration was not mutual. Brando reportedly grew tired of Dean's mimicry, calling him a copycat who lacked originality. The young star's obsession with Brando bordered on fixation, and though Dean's short career carried echoes of Brando's intensity, Brando dismissed him as an imitator rather than an equal. Dean's arrival in Hollywood was shadowed by Brando's influence. After A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, Brando had revolutionized screen acting with his quiet realism and unpredictable presence. Dean studied those performances obsessively. He mirrored Brando's mannerisms, his hunched shoulders, even his slurred line deliveries. While the public hailed Dean as the next Brando, the man himself saw only imitation. The relationship between the two was complex. Dean sought Brando's mentorship, reportedly calling him repeatedly and even showing up at his home uninvited. Brando grew wary. He once quipped to a friend that Dean seemed less interested in acting than in copying whatever I did, like a shadow trying to become a person. To Brando, Dean's fixation was not flattering, it was suffocating. Industry observers often compared their styles.
It wasn't him, Charlie, it was you.
Dean was electric in Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden, channeling youthful angst with raw immediacy. Yet Brando felt that Dean's performances lacked the depth of lived experience. He once remarked that Dean was playing emotions without understanding where they came from, like a sketch without the painting underneath. The tragedy of Dean's death in a car crash at just 24 froze his reputation in myth. Fans canonized him as a fallen genius, a rebel forever young. Brando, however, remained skeptical. He rarely spoke warmly about Dean, and when he did, it was with a distance that suggested more pity than admiration. What stung most was the cultural framing, Dean as heir to Brando's throne. For Brando, there was no throne to inherit, only the unrelenting work of finding truth moment by moment. Dean, in his eyes, never reached that place. For Brando, James Dean was not a rival to be feared, but a reminder of how quickly inspiration could dissolve into imitation, and how the world often confuses one for the other. Number 4, Richard Burton. Brando once referred to Richard Burton's acting as boring, claiming that his theatrical roots never shed their stiffness. Burton, who dominated both stage and screen with a booming voice and Shakespearean gravitas, represented a style Brando rejected outright. For Brando, subtlety was everything. Truth lived in the pause, not the performance. Burton's grandeur was, to him, hollow thunder. Burton came from the theater, rising from Welsh mining towns to become one of the most commanding classical actors of his generation. His Hamlet and his Lear shook London and Broadway, and his voice alone could fill a hall with majesty. Hollywood embraced him as the intellectual leading man, pairing him with Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra, and later making them the most infamous couple of the decade. To audiences, Burton was magnetic. To Brando, he was mechanical.
Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Brando's revolution was rooted in naturalism. He believed an actor should disappear into a role, living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. Burton, in his eyes, never disappeared. He declaimed. Brando once told a friend that Burton spoke every line like it had been polished for a museum, but life is not polished, it is messy. Their approaches clashed on principle. Burton valued clarity and projection, trained to reach the farthest row of a theater. Brando valued mutters, silences, and hesitation, human sounds that caught reality in the cracks. To Brando, Burton's voice was thunder without lightning.
Him. 1, 10, anyone? No one? Have they kissed you with Caesar's lips, touched you with his hands?
Privately, Brando also criticized Burton's choices off stage. He felt Burton squandered his talent on epics and melodramas, more concerned with fame and money than with craft. He once dismissed Burton as a great actor who made bad bargains, pointing to films that sold tickets but rarely revealed truth. Burton, for his part, was not blind to Brando's disdain. He reportedly bristled at comparisons, calling method acting an excuse for inarticulateness in interviews. He saw Brando's mumbling as sloppiness, a betrayal of the discipline acting required. Each man believed the other was corrupting the art form. In truth, both left marks on history. Burton as the voice of Shakespeare on film, Brando as the face of cinematic realism. But they never found common ground. For Brando, Burton's performances were monuments, not lives. And monuments, however grand, never truly breathe. Number 5. Laurence Olivier. The greatest clash was with Laurence Olivier, widely hailed as the finest classical actor of his generation. Brando had no reverence. He described Olivier's performances as technical, cold, and calculated. To Brando, Olivier embodied artifice, the very opposite of his raw, instinctive method. It was not just critique, it was rejection. Olivier was the establishment, Brando the insurgent. Their opposition became philosophical, a war over what acting was meant to be. Olivier was theater royalty, knighted for his service to Shakespeare, celebrated for performances that fused intellect with authority. His Hamlet, his Othello, his Richard III became touchstones of 20th century stagecraft. On screen, he carried the same precision, every line sculpted, every gesture rehearsed. To his admirers, this was mastery.
A king, perhaps.
My lord.
How chanced the prophet could not have told me, I being by.
To Brando, it was lifeless. Brando's method relied on instinct, drawing from lived experience, letting emotion erupt spontaneously. He once remarked that Olivier played the words beautifully, but never played the life underneath them. For Brando, the pause, the hesitation, the stumble mattered more than the polished finish. Olivier's perfection was, to him, the enemy of truth. Their rivalry was not imagined. It surfaced publicly. In the 1960s, Olivier dismissed method acting in interviews, calling it a lot of mumbo-jumbo for people who cannot act without help. Brando bristled at such remarks, insisting that Olivier represented a dying tradition that clung to theatricality in an era demanding realism.
We've known each other many years, but this is the first time you ever came to me for counsel, for help.
The cultural contrast was stark. Olivier stood for the British classical tradition, disciplined and precise. Brando stood for the American Revolution, messy, instinctive, and unpredictable. Audiences debated who was the true giant. Olivier with his command of language, or Brando with his ability to dissolve into a character so fully that the art became invisible. Privately, Brando accused Olivier of caring more about being admired than about being real. He once said Olivier always looked like he wanted to be congratulated, not believed. Olivier, in turn, saw Brando as undisciplined, a talent squandered by laziness and contempt for technique. In the end, their feud was not resolved. Each remained a symbol of opposing schools, their legacies intertwined not through collaboration but through contrast. For Brando, Olivier represented the mask, and for a man who built his craft on stripping masks away, that was unforgivable. Marlon Brando's story is not only about genius, it is about defiance. Each feud, whether with Frank Sinatra's polish, Charlton Heston's grandeur, James Dean's imitation, Richard Burton's thunder, or Laurence Olivier's control, was more than personal. It was a rejection of what Brando believed acting should never become: mechanical, safe, or artificial. To Brando, performance was not decoration. It was truth pulled from chaos, even if the truth was ugly. He measured other actors not by their fame, but by their willingness to strip away the mask. And when they failed, he carried that disappointment like a scar, never forgetting, never forgiving. In the end, Brando left behind more than roles. He left a philosophy. Acting was life, unpolished, unpredictable, and burning with honesty. That was his rebellion, his war, and ultimately his legacy. Which clash surprised you most? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories from Hollywood's hidden history.